actually happened yesterday. And if they have any comments, opinion, they should also be able to advise us. And then we will come back to the people on the ground to be able to make a contribution of. So, and we know our partners into this activity, University of Dodoma, University of Zambia, Jyväskylä, and University of Helsinki. If we can get a reflection from the core partners to start with, it will be really appreciated. So our partners online, welcome. I don't see any hand yet. Although Ilmari's name is flashing. I would like to invite the people online to give a brief reflection of our session yesterday, the opening session and the keynote. So Barry is attempting to speak, but I'm not sure. Are we all hearing? No. No, your voice is truncated. I do not know why it is like that. Yesterday it was like that as well. Is there an IT person who can help out? Something. Is it the headphone or what is it? Can we invite Monga to speak while Barry is fixed? Not yet, Barry.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Msoka. Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
You're audible. Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity just to comment on what transpired in yesterday's, I think, reactions based on the keynote speech that was given by Professor Rugumamu. I think one of the things that was so appealing from our end, and also trying to reflect on what is happening on the ground, is that indeed we seem to be more emphatic on teaching and less on research as universities. And I'm also talking about this in the context of Zambia, where we see more of enrollments in terms of students, both at undergraduate and postgraduate. But when you're talking about the issues to do with funding for research, which matters the most, as Professor Rugumamu pointed out, I think that area we seem to be seriously lacking. There seems not to be serious prioritization in terms of funding towards research. So the idea around creating regional university centers of knowledge, I think that was something that I think made a lot of sense. And that indeed requires thinking outside the box. Of course, as the institutions of higher learning, we may be, grappling with the issues of resources, but sometimes, again, when you look at the need perhaps to work together, it makes it relatively easier even to talk about, fighting for resources that we are all complaining about. Now, there was a question that I think was raised by one of the participants who was talking about who are the we. And I think that should have been the Dasto, which I found quite interesting. Yes, to begin with, in my own thinking, I think it is us as the individuals to start with who should take perhaps the initiative. And then, as individuals, we have a role to play in terms of helping conscientizing the masses and also working together in ensuring that we bring this to fruition. I know governments have a huge role to play, but we can also work along with even the private sectors to help maybe prioritizing knowledge production in the area of research. Now, one thing that I found a bit more, which I was not so clear about, which I think is my last point here, is I know quite all right, yes, development studies is not about the developed world, but the developing world, as perhaps Professor Rugumamu pointed out. But in my thinking, I tend to think that perhaps at the time, yes, development studies was initiated, the thinking was around the developing countries. But this time around, I see development studies becoming more relevant, not only to developing countries alone, but developed countries as well. Because we've also realized that some of the past mistakes that we've made are also seen in the West. So meaning some of the things, including the issues of globalization, which transcend territorial boundaries, make it more sensible that we should be talking about development studies, not only relevant to developing countries, but also to the developed North. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Monga, for good reflection. Any other hand from the online team? Hamza, do you see any hand?
No, not really.
Oh, yes.
Maybe you can try Barry if he has managed to fix his audio.
Barry is always invited when he's ready, so that he can. I see Tina online. Tina, good morning. Habari ya asubuhi, Tina. Good morning.
Morning.
Hello.
Hello, habari nzuri. Habari za Dar es Salaam. Okay, good morning. I don't have much to add what I said yesterday. I will thank you again for Professor Rugumamu to kind of also kind of combining this very critical reflection of North and Southern relationship knowledge production to the historical developments of that. So it's not something that is only the kind of current issue, but it has been there kind of developing over time. And as I asked yesterday, I would love to hear more about discussion, if it's possible to have kind of discussion that somehow what Monga says kind of in a kind of equal way, kind of does away this kind of binary of north and south, but we could have more kind of research alliances and research and teaching alliances, you know, along the globe, rather than trying to kind of critique the knowledge production asymmetries, but at the same time also reproduce the same asymmetries with that critical discourse. But it's very complicated, so I'm looking forward to this lecture today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tina. Monga had touched on an issue on the importance of development studies, not only to the South, or rather in the South, but also to the global North. And this reminds me of the, if you know the MDGs and the SDGs, usually the last goal is partnership. You know, the partnership between, you know, member states of the UN. And the question is, why do we need this partnership? Why is it important that the Northerners also, or the developed countries, come into this as an issue for them to tackle, the SDGs? They are rich, they're developed already. Why are they engaging in these questions? So I think this is an important question. Poverty knows no boundaries. It cuts across. The problems of underdevelopment, they are not confined to one part of the world. They will go everywhere. I remember when I started higher learning education, the discussion was, if the North is not supporting the South, the South will always move to the North, and they will go and consume the resources and share the wealth they are enjoying. And that was a discussion in the 80s, the early 90s. And so every time I hear the Lampedusa and those events, if you are following the discussion, global migration, the boat people crossing from North Africa to Italy and from France to UK, etc. It reminds me of the discussion of the 90s that the rich countries must take part in the questions of development of the South, because if that doesn't happen, then the poor will also go into the rich areas and they will want to share the resources. And they will bring with them all their problems, the problems that they have. If I am sick and I come to your house, I also bring the disease to the family. And so this is the reason why development studies is not the only subject that has to be studied in the South, but also everyone has to understand the process, because we are tackling the problems of development together. While we are waiting for anybody else, Monga hands is still high. Maybe you help Lord. Anybody from the room who wants to make a reflection?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me this time?
Yes, now this time around.
Oh, good.
Yes, for everybody.
All right. Finally, we found a solution.
Welcome, buddy.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Well, it was really a tour de force kind of lecture yesterday by Professor Rugumamu. He really set us a lot of challenges and tasks. I was most struck, the thoroughness of what he went through, but when he came to his mitigation strategies, I thought that we and what I've been hearing from my students and my fellow colleagues who teach here in Helsinki is that there really is a very, very strongly felt need for a scientific and also practical study of these emancipatory, transformative alternatives. That these aren't just like, shouldn't be just sort of seen as a nice optional course that's just somewhere there in the curriculum. But really, the challenges that we face as humanity are so real and so great. Climate change, and for example, and the security problem of, we've seen the signs of remilitarization, arms races, conflict, and war, and the risks that goes towards nuclear war. Right. So this is very much on the minds of the people that we have a responsibility to share our knowledge with and to develop knowledge with together. So I just wanted to say, I was just inspired by what he said, that we have to take these emancipatory strategies very much into the core of the curriculum, not just as a marginal aspect. So that's my contribution from what I took away from yesterday.
Thank you very much, buddy, for your reflection. And now to the room. Hey, all of us were quiet. There is a hand here.
Okay, thanks. I am organized, IDS staff. I'd like to join the discussion that we had yesterday by trying to challenge the thesis that Rugumamu laid yesterday, that political will is everything. To me, yes, I see that the knowledge divide between North and South is really a political challenge, and yes, some extent it needs a political solution. However, I see the issue of political will is a bit step further. Looking at the whole cycle of knowledge from the inception of idea to the dissemination, the whole exercise, it somehow needs economic resources. To be able to have a power to dictate the knowledge production, dissemination, publication, collaboration, and the whole process. It needs economic muscles. And I think this is one of the challenge ahead of us as global South and developing countries. We need to build stronger economies, stronger society that will have the muscles to sponsor our own research, our own publication, and the different kinds of collaboration and the whole system of knowledge. So otherwise, well, let's say we are willing, but we don't have money, don't have economic resources to sponsor the knowledge production. Will still be lagging because of that. So I think we should also put our effort on economic production, building our economy so that we to be able to detect this knowledge production, and of course to challenge the North hegemony in terms of knowledge production and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Severine. We didn't hear anything from Benta yesterday. Benta, if you are ready, anytime, let us know. From the room, Florence, over there. We are getting ready, and so our presenter should be warming up.
Thank you. My name is Florence Muheire. I'm from RD University. My interest is particularly the knowledge divide and the research outlets that we so much admire, publish in. And I would like to reflect upon how we as scholars have taken ourselves that we don't have maybe the capacity, we don't have the knowledge, we are not able to publish in those high-ranking journals. And then we blame ourselves sometimes and say, you know, the rigor that is in those high journals, you can't publish in time, the reviewers are so rough on us. And then we end up going to these other journals that want to upgrade in actual. But I think some people would agree with me that sometimes you look at the papers published in actual, a paper submitted like last week and it is published this week and somebody has paid $100. And because they are rushing to graduate, because the PhD, to get your PhD must publish, and then you have to publish in such a journal, but it's profiled by actual, but you will never find such a journal profiled by Scopus or Web of Science. So I'm thinking that we need to look at ourselves if we want to compete and be at the same table, at the same level with the global north. We should also aspire to have, to desire to have, to do better, to be better, so that when we are talking at the same table, we are talking at the same level. I think that's what I want to talk about.
Dr. Mbirigenda. Thank you, Florence. For those of you who do not know, Florence is our alumni, IDS.
Thank you so much. Actually, I want to carry on from where Florence said. And it's, yeah, preempting myself. But the issue is, it's not true that Scopus does not have those kind of things. In fact, recently there is a paper that has been in Scopus. The introduction, it says that, yes, I can write your introduction, which is from AI. And it passed. It has been published. And recently there are several papers that have been taken away from Scopus because of those kind of issues. So it is not true that these kind of issues, they are only happening in the South. They are happening all over globally. So when we say that we should also create our things, it should not that because those are higher than us. Why? How did they get there? Why can't we also get there? There is a need to see that we also can do it. And that is the only way we can get there. If we simply go on degrading ourselves and saying that they are better than us, we are not getting anywhere.
Thank you, Doc. An additional reflection of events yesterday?
A quick one.
Yes, Hamza. Dr. Hamza.
Thank you. This topic, as we said yesterday, is a bit controversial and difficult, but we need to proceed from the point of view that we have to forge a partnership, and at the end of the day, it is not supposed to be the kind of debate where we point the fingers on each other that you did this, you made us to be like this. We need to proceed in the angle that we create kind of partnership where we have mutual kind of collaboration, where we maximize the possibility of having benefit on the both sides. But like what other colleagues have pointed out earlier, we need to build the capacity in order to sit on the same table with those who are powerful in order to be discussing and having mutual kind of interest and sharing the benefits. Unless otherwise, things will continue to be as they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamza. I'm going to do a 1 minute reflection, then Patrick, and then turn back to MC, who's going to make a reflection, but also invite the next speaker. I think what is important in the discussion today so far, and what exactly happened yesterday, is the South must be prepared. The South needs to be prepared. And these preparations demand investments, not only of the resources, but also time, the thinking, planning. If you do not do those, then it will take us longer to get there where we want to go. And it also needs a commitment. Putting resources into this means draining resources from other areas into this. It's a code that we also need. And we need to make an investment in time, planning, thinking, the right thinking, so that we can achieve where we want to go. And we need to reflect also on the outcomes that we are desiring. If you do not do adequate reflection, then we will always invest resources, but maybe we will not get the outcome that we are thinking, what we want. High impact journals with content that is good, that is verified, that is used by everybody. Knowledge production in the South, health centers of excellency, as they were mentioned yesterday, the centers that can really kick and be able to raise issues at the global level and set the agenda. Are we able to set the global agenda? If we have strong institutions in the South that are well planned, they have critical mass of minds that can engage with issues, I think the South can also do. Professor Rugumamu is retired and he likes joking every time. I'm now out. It is your turn. Please invest time. I want to see policies. I want to see your arguments. I want to see what you're producing that will make a difference, contribution. So I think it's time for us now to really sit and begin to reference from each other, cross-referencing, reading our own work, etc., as was mentioned yesterday. That will allow us to promote our own activities, promote our work, but also promote the South agenda as well. Patrick, a 1 minute reflection, and then it goes back to Dr. Mbirigenda.
Thank you. My name is Patrick, and I belong to IDS here at the University of Dar. I think I was puzzled yesterday by some of the sentences of Professor Rugumamu when he insisted that the level of asymmetry, the level of divide, North-South divide, is so deep and wide to the extent that even if we are given 100 years, we cannot cope up or we cannot bridge this gap. And I am interested to hear how today's speaker will decolonize that kind of idea that is so deep and wide that we need a lot of efforts to close that gap. So my reflection yesterday was puzzled, and
I'm interested to hear how today's speaker will decolonize that kind of thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Told we have Dr. Elizabeth, Professor Elizabeth from Zumbe, if she can have a quick reflection also from online. And the Director of IDS from Zumbe, yeah. Are you in a position to say something now or maybe later? Karibu. Okay. Just
She's there.
sorry. She's there?
I think so.
She can unmute maybe and say something.
You are muted.
There?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I was following. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Oh, I was following the presentation that Professor Rugumamu. It was very good. It takes me back those years when I was doing development studies in the University of Dar es Salaam. He reminded me many things about these issues of decolonization of minds. And I can see it is still working. It is still there. We are still in that position. So we need to change our attitude. I think we can do something together if we decide to team up and think twice. I think it is possible. Professor has given us a lot of experiences, and there is a lot of reference parts now. I think we don't need to remain and say we cannot do it. I think we can do, because we have brain also. Thank you. I'm still following, but today here we have a problem of power. After sometimes I will be out because my computer will be out of power. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Director, and everybody. Just before we start our keynote for today, just a quick reflection also from myself. Yesterday's keynote was a very interesting topic. It was very broad. I think there was a lot of discussions around multiple domains and areas. To some extent, it was really like a very broad topic, covering some wider economic relations between North and South. Sometimes, for example, going into issues like TRIPS, where you have intellectual properties of knowledge generated in the North, sometimes benefiting the South, but sometimes also going into the academic relation between Northern and Southern scholars in terms of knowledge production, the publishing, storage of knowledge medias like the Scopus and the Agile, etc. But now with the globalization and the world becoming a global village, some states of the South transitioning to become also advanced economies, then the line between North and South then blurring, as you could see cases of India and China becoming more and more complex to be counted whether as Northern or Southern, but at the same time then now global issues as Barry put it. So there are some issues of which affects the entire world or the humanity, the mankind. So issues like pandemic, as we saw in the COVID-19, I think it was a time for all humans to be one, and there's no North and South when we were dealing with the pandemic. And this is also the case when we're dealing with issues like climate change. I think this affects everybody. There's no way out we can divide and say this is a North and South issue. And similarly, issues like migration and population also brings a lot of cross-nation effects. Multinational corporations are also breaking borders when you have the global value chains and the production systems which cuts across different borders of nations, etc. So this was very important. But the most important thing is these critical challenges of humanity and the planet Earth are also very important for we scholars of development. And there is where we also concluded from yesterday's discussion that we have to be together, we have to unite. There shouldn't be North and South for us. So we should join hands and work together.
and the knowledge production system for us should really be collective. I didn't hear much about issues like open source and more access to research knowledge for the Southern, initiatives like Research for Life, Agora, Hinari, which used to be in the past so that people in the South can access more because of these multinational companies like LCB, etc., which are really expensive for institutions and scholars in the South to be able to access them. But yeah, so there's much more to discuss around this. But yeah, so there's a lot of interesting discussion today in the topic of decolonizing development studies, and we can hear now voices from the South. But I have to hand it over the mic to the chair of this session, who is going to be Dr. Ajali, who is the director of IDS from University of Dodoma. So stay tuned, those who are online. We will have a very wonderful keynote again today, and then later on we can have some time for discussion. So for those who are online, just alert us if there's a problem with audio or anything, and then we continue. So and now to Dr. Ajali to chair the session, and then I'll take over when you come to Q&A.
Thank you so much. My name is Ajari Mustafa, but Ajari is not an accident. Yeah, I will not take much time to introduce Dr. Mbirigenda because we have been waiting for his presentation, and actually at some point he was restricted of speaking yesterday because of he was worried that he will preempt himself. So with this brief remark, I want join me to invite Dr. Mbirigenda for his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. To start with, those who are expecting me to decolonize Rugumamu's idea, that's not what I'm here for. So I might not be able to go to your expectations. My idea today is not to provide answers. My idea here is to start a discussion. Discussion on how development study should be, especially in the South. What should be, how it is today, and what should be there. And this presentation is divided into the introduction, then I will go into the concept of decolonization, what it means, then how is the debate of decolonization in the academia. Then I will talk about debate on decolonization of development studies. And then I will talk about the voices from the South. What are our perspectives from the South as academicians? It doesn't mean that these voices are the ones that exist, but it is a starting point. And then I will go to the conclusion and offer some recommendations. So I would start by saying that around in the 1950s, there was a paradigm shift. And this paradigm shift was guided by historical, comparative, and global perspective. And actually, it brought about a diversity in thinking and also in practice. And it still continues to shape the development thinking and its significance policy debates today. What I can say is that this paradigm shift, it continues making research in DS comparatively accurate and comprehensive in terms of capacity to capture full impact of the process of development. What makes
DS actually be able to do that is because it's wholesome. It talks about the cultural, it talks about the social, it talks about the economy, it talks about the politics, it talks about the institutional changes and all those. This is not something that the discipline-specific approach can actually capture. Discipline-specific approach fails to capture all of these together. So DS actually comes as a separate field of intellectual analysis, whereby it incorporates multi and interdisciplinary approach, and it has a diverse methodologies. It unifies different theories from various disciplines. So actually, we do not have a theory which we can really call that this is a development study theory. We put together theories from different fields, and actually they all contribute to the possible solutions for societies and the problems and challenges that we are facing. Development studies and development as a whole is contested in ideas and practice, and it is being criticized inside and outside the academia. Development is not something that we agree that all of us say that this is what development and this is how development should be. However, the problem is that whether it is development as a practice or development as a definition, there is a reproduction of colonial power structures and the Eurocentric logic. It continues up to today. Not much has changed. The realities of the global majorities in the South is actually controlled by few powerful people in the North. Powerful companies, powerful elite, and those kind of such kind of things, including the multilateral organizations. So development studies actually, after the collapse of the bipolar world, it came to be dominated by the liberal theories, whether it is in economics, in politics, in sociology, and they were all boasting about the development state paradigms, talking about how the tigers developed, the Asian tigers. Countries like China, Vietnam, Botswana, Seychelles, and the others, showing that this is the way that of decolonization, because decolonization has not started today. Years of decolonization, yet this hegemonic notion of development continues to dominate. You cannot talk about development today if you do not mention the World Bank. You cannot talk about development today if you do not mention the IMF. And this is the reason why a number of us, when we are talking here, we started by MDGs, the SDGs, and so on. So, despite that, we have been contesting this kind of definition. We have been criticizing this kind of definition. We have been talking about transformation. We have been contesting the meaning of development. The hegemonic notion of development that has been controlled by Eurocentric thinking still exists. So the agenda is not set by us. The agenda is set by the powerful North. And it is bankrolling development, many times with money. Funding politics here and there, and sometimes even with the military power. that this is the type of development that everybody should actually agree to. Criticizing it brings about a threat to the one criticizing it, and a threat to those who are controlling the definition of development. Well, there are some tropes of inclusion, tropes of diversity, participation, democracy, sustainability. We talk about equality. But those kind of discourses, actually, they don't bring much change. The hegemonic power structure continue to reproduce the inequalities, continue to reproduce the injustices. And this goes across scales and locations. Most of the universities, University of Dar es Salaam is not an exception. University of Zambia is not an exception. Dodoma is not an exception. Mzumbe and the others, they are not an exception. We are all oriented in the Northern knowledge system. And the Northern knowledge system has a tendency of silencing variety of ways of knowing and understanding. And this is what we want to talk about when we talk about decolonization. So right now, development is simply seen as a creative adjustment of coloniality, whereas the colonial logic and imperative remain. Nothing has changed. The extraction of resources in the South, restructuring of nation states and economies, consolidation of powers in the hands of few still continues to date. The practice of surveillance, conformities, alienation, they still continue today. Despite the goodwill, the feel-good discourses we are talking about, the MDGs and SDGs, there is nothing really happening. They are simply to make us feel good, but actually, in reality, nothing is changing. So decolonization is an effort to dismantle this dominant hegemony, to dismantle these hierarchies. We are here today, actually, to say that power is concentrated and controlled in terms of geopolitics, race, class, gender, and other identities. And actually, all of these are happening in the North and not in the South. The introduction of DS in Tanzania, it was meant to make the student get the skills, get methodologies, and approaches which would allow them to know their society, to know where they are coming from, and then tackle the problems of their society, and be able to develop appropriate solutions. That was the idea of starting development studies in Tanzania. However, after the collapse of the bipolar, things started to change. These are no longer the realities. The development studies has taken a new direction. Nothing now is being talked about how the North is actually exploiting the South. What we are simply talking about is about how these liberal theories can actually develop the South and so on, how the MDGs and SDGs can do good for our development and all these. Now, decolonizing development studies requires us to recognize, understand, and address these historical issues. Issues of violence that the North has done to the South. and then think about how we can go away from there. So what is decolonization? Actually, the concept of decolonization is really popular, but it is difficult to conceptualize, just like the concept of development. People have been putting the word into a number of uses, and at the end, it's difficult to pinpoint one use. But we can say that the concept itself, it roots back to the time of the Cold War, when Africa started to talk about how we can get our independence. And this is not only about Africa, it was also about Asia. It was also about the Caribbean countries, talking about political independence and why we need to move away from the Western imperialism. But later on, after we got our independence, then this word started now to talk about the denial of our own position in the global arena. That we got our independence, but then our position in the global arena was not significant. So we started to talk about why should the West continue to interfere with our affairs? So decolonization was about to do away with the influence of the Western nations into the African nations. When Tanzania started to talk about ujamaa, and then the Western countries started to say that ujamaa should not take Tanzania anywhere, and they started to kind of boycott development projects in Tanzania. This is the time we say we need to decolonize. And Nyerere was at the forefront of this. I remember Professor Mpangala talking about the Nkrumah Hall, that Nyerere at some point, when there was the debate about West Germany and East Germany, and the Nyerere came up to recognize East Germany, West Germany got very angry. And by that time, it was building Nkrumah. So they told Nyerere, if you recognize East Germany, then we are going to stop all the aid that we are giving Tanzania. And Nyerere said, you should not interfere with our internal affairs. We are no longer your colonies. We wanted to decolonize. We wanted to say that we can choose our own friends. So if you want to stop aid, stop it. So Mpangala said, actually, this is not the way Nkrumah was supposed to be. But since Nyerere said, to hell with your aid, Western Germany stopped building Nkrumah, and it remained as a monument to say that this is a monument of decolonization in Tanzania. The influence of the global North. Then there is, together with the decolonization, is the concept of coloniality, which explains the condition associated with the marginalization and influence of the global North towards the global South. So decoloniality then is the everyday and ongoing efforts to challenge the persistent forms of coloniality. We are trying to denounce all the Eurocentric views about Africa. That is what decolonization is about. So decolonization is a need to move away from colonial infrastructures that govern knowledge, culture, bureaucracy, and many others. In decolonization is that we are saying how decolonization should be achieved. So the idea here is that decolonization can be a theory. It is about saying that, well, We can use it as a tool to engage into critical argument. But then decolonization can also be a movement to say that with affirmative actions, then we can do away with coloniality. But also, it can be an option and not a movement, a mission, a process of healing the colonial wounds, to say that we can actually collaborate. We can actually move away from that history. As a movement, then it is practical. And recently, we have seen this kind of movement being practiced in a number of countries. Roads must fall is one of them. Why is my curriculum black in South Africa is one of them. Fees must fall is another. So it can be a powerful concept, and therefore it is actually practical. How is the debate in the academia? Just like I said before, there have been different meanings associated with the word decolonization. As a result, then, there are also different viewpoints in the debate. The viewpoints are around 3 areas. First of all, what does it mean? Debate has always been, what does decolonization mean? And then the second debate is about what aspect should be decolonized. And the third is how to achieve the decolonization goals in the academia. There are some scholars who are actually associating decolonization as a kind of religious movement. And they are saying it brings about zombification. That at some point, you are both. By both here, I mean that it's the question of those who are being robbed and those who are robbing. They are both zombified. And one scholar says that zombification is a state of impotence, is a state of powerlessness of the ruler and the ruled, each of which having robbed the other of vitality, leaving both politically unconscious and impotent. So what he's trying to tell us is this, that if we are not careful to examine our own situation, then we are walking around like zombies. Like yesterday, Rugumamu, what he said, that we are dancing to the tune that we are never playing. Somebody is choosing the tune for us, and we are dancing like zombies. The problem of post-colonial Africa is not the chain. It is what is in our mind. When we say that ours is not good, the other is better. The problem is not what exists out there. The problem is how we conceive what exists out there. So what we are trying to say here is that if we are not careful, this debate of decolonization is actually being stolen by scholars in the North. And there are some scholars who are saying that scholars in the North should avoid whitening and politicizing the expression to decolonize and using it as simply a buzzword. Decolonization actually is about us, whether we like it or not. what needed to be decolonized is in the South. One time Nyerere said, you do not have your uncles in the North. You should not expect them to do it for you. You need to do it yourself and then find those similar, like-minded in the North. But right now, it is like we are actually leaving everything. The debate is being left on the North. And sadly, the contribution from the South is being neglected. And this is exactly where the sound, the voice of decolonization should come from. Without these voices, nothing is going to be achieved. It is the one who wears the shoes knows exactly where it pinches. It's the one who can explain it better. So there is a danger that the Northern academics in intellectual decolonization may actually re-westernize the idea. Instead of decolonizing, they might even colonize it. So what we are saying is that there is a danger of reinforcing the Northern hegemony instead of doing away with it, if this debate is left only to the Northern side. There is coloniality of power, the wide range of power relations. These are relating to the cultural, to the political, to the sexual, to the spiritual, to the epistemic, economic exploitation and oppression. And all of these are actually of about subordinating ethnic groups. We need to realize this. There is a power matrix of subjection, power matrix of insubordination, classification linked to racist distribution and reproduction of labor within the modern capitalism. Capitalism is trying to tell us that it has changed, but actually the international political economy is still the same, exploiting the global South. Nothing has changed. If we don't realize this, decolonization debate will breed nothing. So Mbembe says that intellectual decolonization actually is about dismantling the global upper third in the higher education. There is global upper third, global alienation, where it is said that there is education, there is ideas, there is thinking which is superior coming from the North. And then there are those that are inferior coming from the South. And this is the same even in the outlet. And some of us have swallowed this, that those outlets in the North, they are better than those in the South. And therefore we are leaving this. What we are saying is that we need to decolonize this kind of thinking. The indigenous activists, the authors, and so on. Sometimes whatever is from the South, we are saying that, well, this is traditional. Whatever comes from the North, well, this is modern. And therefore we need to modernize. There is a preference of the Eurocentric values and modernity and we inferiorize ourselves, saying that there is this indigenous epistemologies, indigenous perspective, traditional way of thinking. And therefore, if somebody tells you that you have a traditional way of thinking, it is like now he's abusing you. You are traditional. You need to be modern. And when we talk about being modern, we are not talking about being like a Maasai. We are talking about being like those in the north. And it goes into the same way when we talk about development. Development, then, it is being like those in the north. And therefore, they are the ones to tell us if we are developed or we are not. But Nyerere already in 1971, he said, with libraries and laboratories, universities have the core social function of expanding the frontiers of knowledge by bringing together some of the most intellectually capable individuals in the nation to facilitate the pursuit of knowledge for the entire community benefit. We are here for the entire community benefit, the benefit of Tanzania. Now the question is, our universities today, do we still have that kind of thinking? Or we need to decolonize? So decolonization is about epistemological and ontological transformation. And it is epistemological transformation that will lead to ontological transformation. So it is necessary to integrate the knowing, acting, and being in order to actually achieve that ontological turn. So decolonization is asking ourselves, what kind of knowledge and whose knowledge is important for the institutions that are located in the South? We should not simply take that it is knowledge, but what type of knowledge, what kind of knowledge, and whose knowledge? Should it be our knowledge? Should it be other knowledge? And what is that we call other? So you will hear terms like traditional knowledge, local knowledge, the local journals. And sadly enough, even Kiswahili journal is called a local journal. The place where Kiswahili has the origin. So which one is the international? And this is the type of ideas that we are getting. So traditional and the local have negative connotation. So as a result, our knowledge becomes secondary. It is taken as being inadequate for analytical rigor. So today, if we are to talk about somebody coming up with an idea, the first thing we are asking ourselves, is it in the international journal? We are not even asking ourselves, before the international journals, didn't people have good ideas? Were they not rigorous enough? Can't we actually examine our own ideas and say that this is rigorous enough and this is not? So in sum, the argument in the academia is that there is a need for reorganization and the integration of the locally specific content into the curriculum. So There are those who are saying that we need to decolonize the entire higher learning education, decolonize the whole curriculum, decolonize the institutions. And there are those who are saying that, no, we need to decolonize a subject. We need to decolonize a discipline specific. So there is the entire and the specific discipline approach. Now, how is the debate in the development studies? If we look historically, decolonization discourse in the DS cannot be separated from other discourses of decolonization. In the 70s, in the 80s, whether in the natural science discipline or in the social sciences, they went together. And the idea is to interrogate the historical legacies of colonialism, the persistent inequalities that has actually bred out from colonialism. So there is a necessity for the colonial approach to reconfigure the development agenda. So understanding the discourse that surround decolonization in DS, it requires us to contextualize within the historical legacy of capitalism, especially colonialism. We cannot talk about decolonization without these historical facts. That colonial powers exploited resources, they imposed governance structures, perpetuated cultural hegemony in colonized territories, leaving enduring scars on their socio-economic fabric. That there is hierarchical global order, whereby the global north dominates the global south, perpetuating economic dependence, cultural marginalization, and epistemic injustices. And here, I'm going to talk about 4 areas. These are not all that exist, but we decided to choose these 4 areas. That is knowledge, teaching, and research in DS, development and mainstream development paradigm as discussed in DS, global governance setup as it is, then the asymmetrical North-South partnership as it exists today. Knowledge, teaching, and research. So decolonization is about the unsettling hegemonic narratives. It is about embracing diverse epistemologies and amplifying marginalized voices within the development discourses. Those development definitions that exist, but they are not brought into the global arena. What do the Maasai say about their development? Is it about $1 in a day? Do they even know what is a dollar? There are multiple directions of knowledge, and thus they are in and outside, and they should be embraced in development studies, and they should inform theories and practice. However, the problem is that when we start to talk about the inside and the outside, Marx is saying that, well, then we are talking about superstructure, and that is manifested in the capitalism, the economic system of capitalism. So as it is today, the current geography of knowledge production, consumption, and dissemination, it favors the North than the South. The commercialization of knowledge has made it difficult for scholars from the South to keep up with the publication politics. It is politics. whether we like it or not. It is easier for me, for example, to write a paper with a scholar in the North and it get published in whatever else sphere that you are talking about than if I write it with another scholar in the North. It's politics. Publication has politics. And it has cost. In order to get published in those, you have to pay. And scholars in the South might not have the money to pay. So it is not simply about the quality of the paper. It's also about the quality of your pocket. These are the things that we should not leave unsaid. With a handful of giant global academic publishers from the North that are dominating the publishing sector. And now and then, what they are doing is that they are trying to say that the outlets in the South, they are of not good quality. And we are dancing to that tune. We are not saying that they are all of good quality. Yes, there are a number of those publishers in the South that are not good, but we should not put them all in the same cup. They should not be put all in the same basket. At the end, a paper is good because it is good, not because of the publisher. There are a number of papers that have been published in the so-called bad journals, and they are very rigorous. And there are a number of those that have been published in the so-called good journals, and they are actually rubbish. The question is, can we analyze the paper and not the publisher? Can we talk about good idea and not the person who actually give out the idea? Can we discuss the idea of the person and not the person? So, it is important that universities should not actually compete to attract new customers. Because this is the thing that is making research and knowledge production go down. Universities have become places where education can be sold, where education can be bought. And the obstacle to decolonization then becomes the neoliberal setup, which has made academic sphere a marketplace. The neoliberal economy, always talking about the market. And now everything has become something for sale. So decolonization then in DS would mean that those privileged few should continue practicing public intellectualism, criticizing contemporary academic landscape, while at the same time forging alliance with the solidarity of the social movement to demand change. And these alliances can be forged whether with those in the South or those in the North. But the important thing is the like-minded individuals, like-minded social movements. And we need to understand that this is not easy, because those who challenge the status quo should be vigilant that they will always be labeled as deviant. Once you start talking about, well, we can also make our journals in the South become also competitive, whatever they are going to tell you is that because you cannot actually publish in those competing journals, that's why you are talking about these journals. You are going to be labeled. But then we need to take our stand. The DS ontologies, DS epistemologies, the DS process of dissemination of research as it is now, it is colonial. Our curriculum is colonial. Every time we talk about what we should teach, we always talk about what are other universities teaching? What are they teaching in DS? The question is, should the problem of Tanzania be not a problem simply because it doesn't resemble the problem of the other people? That you are not going to die from hunger because the whole world has food. So we should not be talking about our people dying from hunger simply because the other people in the world do not have a problem with food. And always people will talk like, well, we need international students. It's a good thing to have international students. But the question is, should our education be for the international students? Should it be to solve international students' problems? Decolonization then should be about, look here, we need not be passive about our own research. We need not use our academic journey or funding requirements as a way to silence the problems of the South. What are our problems that need research? Should they be problems of the whole world? Should they be problems of the North? Emphasis should be on examination, improving our peoples in the South, not coping with what goes on in the North. That is what decolonization in teaching and research should be about. Then how is development and the mainstream development paradigm? The way we define development is always rooted in the Western modernization theories, neoliberal description. This is what we teach. And these actually, it furthers inequality. It brings the ecological disasters as we have today. The climate change we are talking about, we are saying that this is a global problem. The question is, are the causes really global? Do you want to tell me that those people in the villages are actually polluting the environment at the same level as the northern industries? But then they also have to pay the same price as those who polluted in the north. You are telling an old man in the village not to cut trees because he's going to upset the so-called carbon, yes. The question is that just? This guy even doesn't know what you are talking about, and he contributed very little on what you are going through. And yet he has to pay the price. And we are here talking, this is a global problem, and therefore everybody should actually be aware of these and actually ask to act. And we are not talking about who caused it and at what level. So the paradigm actually is inherently colonial. It perpetuates asymmetrical power relations. And it is homogenizing as if everything is actually the same all over. And we contributed to the problem at the same level. We are not able to say that we have diverse societies and they are not contributing to the problem at the same level. And therefore, they should not be actually tasked at the same level. So development interventions actually is prioritizing economic growth over social justice, exacerbating inequalities, and actually marginalizing the local agencies. Decolonization, therefore, is calling for reimagining development beyond these Eurocentric issues, the Eurocentric lenses. We need to center on the emancipatory approaches. We need to prioritize self-determination. We need to determine our own development. It is us who should say that now we are developed, now we are not developing, now we are happy, now we are not happy. Not to leave this to the World Bank to come and say, oh, now you have developed. As if we are zombies who cannot know what is development for us. We need to take on the cultural pluralism. We need to take on collective well-being in the South. What about the global governance setup? The governance of the UN, the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, and their cousin, the World Trade Organization. They are there not to safeguard the interest of the majority. They are there to safeguard the interest of the capitalist few wealthy people while pushing the majority into poverty, dependence, and the debt traps. The IMF will give money here and there, not to help people get out of poverty, but actually to get them into the debt trap so that when they tell them to do things, they wouldn't resist. Are we aware of these issues? Are we aware of this global governance that it is not just? It is being controlled by those majority few. And yet it is there advertising itself as it is there for the majority. Does DS criticize this or it goes with the tune? There are some voices talking about this. Mugabe, for example, at one point, he said, we are supposed to be free and independent, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. We are supposed to be free. 54 African countries. We come to the United Nations ceremonial every year in September. We pay a lot of money to go there. And in the General Assembly, we make speeches year in and year out. But the bosses in the Security Council say, you shall never have the power that we have as permanent members. And we have asked and asked and asked and asked and asked again, reform the Security Council, but nothing is being done. So even the global governance need to be decolonized because it goes the same way, pushing injustices into the world. Then the asymmetrical North-South partnership. Power asymmetries, they are also vivid in development assistance, in aid, in academic partnership, in technology transfer, and so on. The traditional models, they often perpetuate dependence and reinforcing donor-recipient dichotomies. They undermine the sovereignty and dignity of recipient nations. So the North-South collaboration actually should not reproduce these inequalities. Most of the project of the North-South partnership, you see that the North, they are the initiator and the funder, and therefore they have all the voice. So the decolonial partnership prioritize mutual respect, mutual solidarity, and shared learning, moving away from the charity-based approaches. The North is not there to give charity. We need transformative collaboration. We need to address the root causes of the inequality and the injustices. So we in the South, what are we actually saying? We are saying that decolonization discourse lacks practicability and it risks essentializing diverse experiences with the global South. And there are some scholars who are cautioning against romanticizing the pre-colonial past. That we are saying we Africans in the past, we were good, we were like this. But then there is a danger of dismissing something which is also good from the North. So we need to be realistic. We have something good from the South, but there is also something good in the North. And we have put together the two. This is where the partnership is coming in. So we therefore argue that DS in the South has its unique history, and this is the history of underdevelopment. It is a result from the ravaging, plundering, and exploitation by the North. The history of slavery, expansion of capitalism, leading to the colonialism and its aftermath in the poor nations of the world. And this is why the DS in the South, the early DS, was hinged upon the history of underdevelopment and the Marxist philosophy. The philosophy of doing away with capitalism, criticizing capitalism. So DS in the South, which is silence on these atrocities that led to the underdevelopment in the South, is part of the colonial DS. So decolonization of DS should be about teaching students the origin of these lagging behind of the North and equip them with analytical skills to come up with their own philosophy of development. So DS in the South should not be about imparting technical skills. It should be imparting thinking skills, analytical rigor to the students, so that they can come up with a new way of development, away from the capitalism, away from the market system economy. If we are putting the technical skill to our students as what we want to do, and what Rugumamu talked about yesterday, then we risk DS being rejected. It has already been rejected in Makerere, for example. Why? Makerere are saying that there is no need for DS because DS is creating people who would be working in these international organizations, and we don't have many of those in Uganda, which is true. Because DS is creating technicians who need to go to be employed somewhere. And if those employment doesn't exist, why do we need DS? But DS in the South should be different from that DS in the North. It should create critical thinkers and not reproduce technicians. DS in the South has to prepare people who can own their process of development, from defining what development is, evaluating it, and at the end, coming up with their own philosophy, not in the lenses of the World Bank and the IMF, but with their own lenses, creating their own lenses to define what is development, to define how development should be. So, in conclusion, I am saying that decolonization of DS is actually a critique of Fukuyama end of history, whereby he says the non-Northern people have only to accept the ready-made Northern development theory, development agenda, and even evaluation of what development should be and where they have reached. Decolonization in DS is to push for an agenda that the dominant narratives of development does not mean that there are no other narratives or they are of less important, they are inferior. It simply means that they are those hegemonic powers that have the muscles, whether economically or military, to push their own narratives. So it is important to say that what we are experiencing today is actually capitalism. What Nyerere and the others were fighting for is still there. Capitalism has only changed the face. But the inside logic is still the same. It is what they say. The more it changes, the more it remains the same. Plus ça change, plus ça la même chose. The more it changes, the more it remains the same. The internal structure of capitalism is still the same, and we are still fighting that. So decolonization is to push for Southern origin research agenda that aim to solve Southern people problems as they see themselves, not as problems seen by the World Bank and the IMF and the like. So decolonization of DS in curriculum, both teaching and research, should aim at producing students who can engage with the global South problems and critically think outside the box of the liberal market model to produce knowledge that can solve Southern countries' problem and not continue to reproduce the colonial power dynamics. With this, I say thank you, Kitos, natolea, asante sana.
Yeah, thank you so much for a very detailed, articulate, and insightful presentation, Dr. Mbirigenda. Now we have the time to continue to ask questions, to provide comments, and we will invite people in the room. But again, those who are online, if we have them, Hamza will help us. So let us get started. So yes. We start here, and then we'll go this way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mbirigenda, for a wonderful presentation, well detailed and informative. I have, this is a many questions, but within this question, I have small questions within the next question. From your presentation, you made it very clear that the essence of introducing development studies in African universities, especially in Tanzania, was to impart students with the skills, knowledge, and approaches to allow them to know, to know the society where they live in and the problems they face, and if they can also develop the solutions towards those problems. So my question is, how long did this system survive? How long did this system survive, especially in Tanzania? And what were the positive results emanated from the system you mentioned? What actually made us change our mind? What made us change the route and find ourselves where we are now? And also, I need to know, do you think it is possible for us to go back to our roots in a situation where our policymakers actually are still debating on how actually they were trying to negotiate with the Northerners how to get more aid to support their socio-economic developments, but also in the situation where our scholars and academicians are still urging each other to get the research funds from the Northerners. Thank you.
Let's go this way. We continue with this part and then we'll go to the end of the day. Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Mbirigenda, for your wonderful and I would say a just presentation. My name is Patrick Mlinga. I'm from the Institute of Development Studies here at the University of Salaam. In your presentation, Dr. Mbirigenda, you pointed very clearly how decolonization should be. I heard and understood about the epistemology and ontology, that they are all injustice, they are unbalanced. And the voice for the South, from the South that you're proposing is to forging alliances, to demand changes, and as well to push our narratives to the level that our narratives can speak to the hegemonic narratives. I would wish to ask if you can give us an insight on what should be our methodologies to do that, since we already have these asymmetric divide between North and South. What would be our alternative methodology to at least push our own research agenda so that they can speak equally or even above the hegemonic narratives? Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Mbirigenda, for this very educative discussion. I'm John Sinde from Institute of Development Studies. I have two issues really to contribute. As you put it when you started, your aim is not to answer the question, how can we colonize, but rather to set a discussion. My first point of contribution is on the conceptualization, because this is the concept and it is a multifaceted concept. If we want to decolonize, we need to define it in the way that you are going to decolonize. So we can only decolonize if we define this concept based on what it means by decolonization. So the conceptualization matters when it comes to the practice or to the ultimate goal of decolonizing, whether we decolonize the mind or we decolonize the way of thinking or the practice, or if it is a movement, what do we decolonize? So the take-home point from what I'm saying here, that probably it is a concept with can be defined in many ways. And you can, if it's a problem, we can only solve this problem if we exactly know what it is. Well, in your discussion, you define this as an effort to dismantle dominant hegemony, hierarchy, and those global inequalities. If from that view, then we throw a burden of blame when it comes to the development, and let us define what development is. Our development is caused by the global north, based on this definition of decolonization. The second point now is, which is related to the case, is whether decolonization is an end or a means. Because if one saw this, if one decolonize, we should find where to put that in that equation, the means for an end. So decolonization, it's not an end by itself, from what I can get from the discussion. An end here is development. So we decolonize in order to attain a certain level of development, but it can also be an end by itself if it simply need to achieve that one. This is the case now. The next question is, how do we define development? And you made an argument here that development itself is also an aspect of what we need to decolonize, because we base our measures of development on the global north. We use indicators that may not be relevant to our local perspective. That in the case now, development itself is an aspect of decolonization. So finally, I just want to shed a light on a particular aspect here, which might be related to what we want to decolonize. We've put issues here of publications. This university, I just want to take a specific example from our own university. We make argument that we can only publish in the rigorous journal that we tell them as rigorous. These are the ones that from the north, which are indexed by Scopus. Even in our own university, we don't recognize or we don't value journals that are published within our own.
Mema, niliona uliniuliza swali.
This university
nilifanyia kazi, mimi nilitoa sehemu nikaitumia kwa teknolojia imekuwa.
Dissemination, which to me now, probably is not the global north. Have an enemy within. We need to, it's a mindset that we need to decolonize. So we really not have a problem with the north. We have a problem with ourselves. It's very even to recognize our own publication outlets. I think that's my contribution at the moment. Okay, thank you. Do we have someone online?
Yes, we have several online, but we have comments and we have live contributors. We have a comment from Sebastian Madu, who is commending Dr. Mbirigenda, saying, "Congratulations, Dr. Mbirigenda, for an intense presentation. This triggers the new thinking and perception on how we can solve our problems in our own way. We should set standards by ourselves. There is a need to use some of the positive approaches of the late President Magufuli, and they were effective. Africa should learn from Gaddafi, Lumumba, Nkrumah, Nyerere, and the like." From Rachel saying, "Powerful, insightful presentation." Someone also is saying, Kenya Rehema Mwasha saying, I and mine opening presentation. From Julia Janice saying, "Thank you for a very thought-provoking session. There would certainly be a need to involve even wider audience in this debate, from higher education institutions to donor agencies." Lulu Siwaya saying awesome presentation. Thank you, Dr. Mbirigenda. Finance in Solar saying very powerful presentation. We have few hands, 4 hands online. We have Bene Mulonda from Zambia, Jacob Surulu, Dodoma, Musa Kapenja, and Monga Mumba, Zambia. We can start with Mr. Chair. Should we start?
Yes, I think we take all of them so that we don't get maybe network problems. Let us.
Okay. Bene, karibu Mulonda. Benny, can we start? We can start with Benny, then Surulu. If Benny is not around, Surulu, can you? You are muted, Surulu.
Hello.
Yes. Yes, we are getting you. Continue. Surulu, you are muted again. Yes.
I'm on now here.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for the time. Also, thank you for Dr. Mbirigenda for a solid keynote that tried to conscientize us, we Global South, where we are and what should be done so that our voice can be heard outside there. I was very much interested with the options that the speaker aired out. That one of the option is to have the movement, but also to have collaborations. Collaboration in a sense that we should buy the goods from the North that we can incorporate in our curriculum so that we can teach our students. But in the side of movement, to my side, I think I am in a dilemma. What kind of movement can we opt that will help us to have a step ahead in this journey? But again, my worry and the dilemma in the contemporary global economy, as far as the voice of Global South is concerned, I try to think in outside the box, the violent nature of the global economic policies, which is championed by the global North. How possible can we be able to come up with our own curriculum that will culture our own initiatives, our own thinking, we Africans? How possible it is? My suggestion, please. Thank you.
Asante Surulu. Can we hear from Musa Kapenja, then Monga, then Ben will be the rest. Musa.
Okay. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
You can hear me?
Yes, Ben, you are Musa.
Okay, did you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. Carry on.
Okay. My name is Musa Kapenja. First of all, I want to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation for those who actually established this kind of event. I have 2 questions to Dr. Shukrani Mbirigenda. The first question is based on the fact that the importance of developmental theories towards triggering the pace of development. Almost all of the theories that are taught are Eurocentric view. They are based on the Eurocentric point of view. So how can Eurocentric view? And the second question.
Yes, Musa, are you done?
What role played by indigenous knowledge and practices?
Are you done, Musa?
Musa is lost, I think, internet connection. Can we hear from Munga? Then Ben.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Mbirigenda. I think another thought-provoking discussion there. Amonga Mumba from the University of Zambia. I think Dr. Mbirigenda did touch on quite a number of issues in terms of what he sees as perhaps areas that we need to deal with. I have basically two questions for him. I like the idea to begin with on the subject of dealing with the global governance institutions. And we're talking about the IMF, the World Bank, and the also World Trade Organizations that are now seemingly driving the neoliberal agenda as we see it. The first question that I have with regards to that is, what would it take to reform the global institutions in his own thinking? And what role can we play as the academia in that regard? Secondly, there was an emphasis on the need to promote indigenous epistemologies and also ontological transformation. Is there anything perhaps that we can point out currently, or are we talking about perhaps the transformation just starting? Is there anything that we can point out in the name of indigenous epistemologies? Thank you.
Benny Mulona.
Okay, thank you so much. And congratulations to Dr. Mbirigenda for that inspiring presentation. Indeed, I've learned a lot. Am I audible enough?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you so much once more. So mine is a question and a comment at the same time. I must mention that I actually like this narrative on decolonization. I feel that it's a subject that we in academia, have for years been passionately speaking about, and we can actually see that we really want to see, things changing in our favor. But I feel that our biggest enemy is our mind. We actually see that we have a lot of African students who desire to go and pursue their studies in the North. That already speaks that they are not sure, they don't have the confidence in their own system. The same applies to us in academia. Those of us that have been privileged to go and pursue our studies in the Western world, and then we come back. We are actually the ones always in the forefront to tell, to preach, or to evangelize to our own students that what we are learning in our own institutions is not good enough. our direction in as far as development is concerned is not up to standards. And we see some of them actually, when they're on the verge of graduating, they're already announcing that when they come back home, they would want to change how things are done. So the moment they begin to speak like that, you can already see that there is no confidence. Our minds have been convinced beyond description that we are not able to do on our own. We cannot see that the direction we are taking and the manner in which we are doing development is not right. So I don't know what Dr. Mbirigenda, thinks will be the best approach in terms of undoing this mindset, so that we get that position, that point where we feel we are able to do it on our own. Otherwise, we shall keep singing the same old song year after year. Thank you so much. I submit.
Thank you, Benny. We have two more, Yohani and Finance. We can hear those and then we get responses and then we will read the type B messages. Yohani?
Thank you so much. That was really a powerful presentation, Dr. Mbirigenda. Thank you. And also many thanks to your colleagues who had cooperated with you. There's very much in your analysis which I can agree with. But as a historian, there was one thing I have a little bit problem with, which is your very strong argument that nothing has changed. The more it changes, the more it remains the same. In my view, there have been really changes, very, very many changes during this time from colonial time to our times. The present structures, I agree that the logic for the colonial structures is very much still present. But that logic works through different kind of mechanisms. There are many changes have happened which have been quite consequential. For instance, the MDGs or SDGs, they are something that have been agreed unanimously by all the nations at the United Nations. So I would think that we should understand what has changed, what has not changed, and how this has happened, for which reasons some of the changes have not been that consequential. And that, I think, is something which should be very much at priority of our research agenda. Thanks.
Finally, Finance, I think we'll get back to those online later on after responses because we have a good number of questions now. Finance, please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mbirigenda, for a very nice presentation. Actually, it's very bold. I have a comment, if not a contribution. And the comment is, we really need to do a decolonization in terms of knowledge, which starts from decolonizing what we already know in Africa and in the South in general, by changing the curriculum and other things. But the issue comes also, if we really need to press a powerful voice against the North, we need to unite. The southern parts of the world need to unite itself in terms of academic issues, in terms of knowledge, that this is what we want as Africa or maybe at the South. But then we really need to prepare before doing that, because we cannot say anything to threaten them if we still depend on their funds for the research. We cannot do anything if we still need them to define what we already know and what we are going to teach our kids. So before doing anything, our governments or our political will should be able to fund our research. Our budget should be raised. We should depend on ourselves before threatening the North that we are going to change what we already know, because it is you who defined what we already know. So we need unit and we need the political will and other things to depend on ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair.
We have had so many issues. I don't know if we will get to respond all of them, but Let's now hear from Dr. Mbirigenda.
Thank you, Chair. I will try to reply to all of them. But as I said before, I don't have the answers. I'm here to start a discussion. And it's good that we are having the discussion. The first question was, when was the DS of University of Dar es Salaam, the way I talked about? It was from the 1973 to the 2000s. And what made it to go away from where it was the collapse of the bipolar world. And after the collapse of the bipolar world, then capitalism became the only bull in town. Now, as the only bull in town, it started to dictate what should be done. So the theories of neoliberalism then became dominant in the world. And therefore it became also, they also became dominant in the US. And what are the good things that we can point out as a result of 1973 to 2000? There are a number. And one of them is the BIS. When the basic industrialization strategy of Tanzania, which became very powerful and successful, it was the one which started a number of industries in Tanzania. Urafiki, Buratex, National Bicycle, and all the industries that they were there. Actually, that idea came from the University of Dar es Salaam. So you can see that there was that critical thinking of how do we develop from within our own country. And the so-called Dar es Salaam School of Thought, it was during that time, and it was very vibrant to be against the status quo that existed, be against the idea of capitalism that existed. And that is what we are missing now. Is it possible to go back? Yes, it is possible to go back. It's possible to introduce again the University of Dar es Salaam School of Thought. And exactly this is what we are trying to do here already. Trying to debate on what is the dominant narrative that exists and say that, well, this should not be the only way of thinking. Because with the idea that neoliberalism has actually won all over other ideas, is to say that there is no any other thinking. The idea of Tina, there is no alternative to what exists. And we are saying, no, there is an alternative. A human being has not come to the end of thought. He can still think, and something new can come up. What we are having now is not the best. It's not the best for the majority. And here I would actually cooperate with what Professor Yuan has said, that there are a number of things that have changed. Things have changed, but the internal structure of capitalism hasn't changed. This is what I'm saying. Capitalism has not changed an inch. It has simply changed the face. Now we have globalization, but it is still capitalism. It is still doing the same thing that it did during colonialism. It is still dominating the weak nations in the world. It is still oppressing the poor people in the world. It is still exploiting the majority of the people. The internal structure of capitalism has never changed. That, for example, the capital is still controlled by a few people in the world, and the rest of us, we still have our labor power to sell. Nothing has changed. If you go, for example, to the problem of capitalism, they are still the same, overproduction. Nothing has changed. In the past, during colonialism, Capitalism was looking for raw material. Now it is looking for market. It's the same story. There is a crisis in capitalism in the north, and then there is finding of the solution in the south. Nothing has changed. What we are seeing is simply that you have a bottle here and it is colorless. Now you are putting color into it and you are saying the bottle has changed. It hasn't changed. You have simply painted it. So capitalism has not changed. Then coming to the second question on what methodologies that we can do. Actually, I don't have an answer, but my question would be, let us look the methodologies we are using now. Do they give us really what we want? For example, how do we teach? Do we expect change from the way we teach and what we teach? If we are simply teaching our students so that they can remember, and then we are examining them on that memory, is that the methodology that will bring us change? What do we teach? As one colleague said, when we go to class, we are the one who are saying that, well, here at the University of Dar es Salaam, actually, the knowledge is lower. If you go to the north, it is higher. Instead of us now changing it to become higher, we are actually praising and saying this is lower, and therefore you shouldn't have been here. So the question is, in other words, I'm also saying that I am useless. So let us think about what and how. What do we research? Do we research about our problems, or do we research about the problems as we are given by the North? Simple example, the problem of malaria. Why do we still have malaria up to date? It's an area of great research, for example. That's one issue. A number of research are going into the malaria. To do what? Now we even want to transform the mosquitoes instead of killing the mosquitoes. Why there are no mosquitoes in the north? Did they transform them or they killed them? Why are we buying these ideas? Instead of thinking about how we can do away with malaria, we are buying the ideas of Vyandarua vyenye dawa. Vyandarua vyenye dawa, what are they going to do? Are you going to walk around with the mosquito nets? So the question is, what do we teach? How do we teach our students to think? Do we teach them to think in a certain way? Or do we think them to think outside the box? And when they think outside the box, do we praise them or do we want them to think as we think? These are the things that we should be talking about in our methodologies. I don't have an answer, so I'm just putting forward what I think. Then the third one was, I think, from Dr. Shukrani, that the concept needed to be agreed first. I agree with that concept. When we start a discussion, you need to agree on how you define the terms. Otherwise, you might be talking about the same thing, but you don't mean the same. So it's important that we agree on what the concept of decolonization means. And then you say that there is a danger of blaming the North. Well, that's true. One thing is history that we cannot escape. The second issue is living the history.
It's fine for me to say, for example, that Dr. Ajani stole my shoes 10 years back. It's a fact if he did that. But the second thing is for me, walking without shoes today because my shoes were stolen 10 years. The two are not the same. That 10 years, I'm still blaming walking barefoot because Ajani stole my shoes. That in 10 years' time, I couldn't buy a new pair of shoes. That's a different story altogether. But saying that he did it, that is history, we can't escape it. That's not the blame. Then the global norm and the global south, the relationship is very, I don't know how to put it. Because while we are saying that in the north, in the south, you have those people who are praising the north and therefore they would want to go that way. That goes back into history as well. When colonialism came, it started that one too, to say that in the races, you have a superior race and you have an inferior race. And therefore, those who are more developed is because they are superior race. And therefore, they can also inherit, give that to their kids. And for those inferior races, the same story. They give the inferiority to their offsprings and so on. It was there. And as a result, it came to be outside as well, that the inferior race wanted to be seen as the superior race. And this is, it goes up to today. The French were very good with this. Assimilated. That you are assimilated, you speak like a French person, you live like them. You even, when speaking, do like this with your hair, even if they are not long, to resemble them. And today we even bleach our skin so that we can be like the superior race. So those have history, and that history has not ended. It is still going on today. That you have inferior knowledge and superior knowledge. You have inferior journals and superior journals. Superior journals, they are situated with the superior race in the north. Because colonialism was about that. Superior race, therefore, can dominate the inferior race. Now it is no longer physical. It is mind. If you read Rugumamu's book, Demystifying Globalization, he talks about that. That the global north are buying the southern leaders so as to become predators of their own economies, to become predators of their own countries. So it is not surprising that even in the South, we have those kind of ideas. Because there are others who have been voted so that they can sing the song of the superior race. How do we come up with our own curriculum? Well, I don't know. But we can set our own standards. As I was saying, for example, should you be told what food should be good for you? Don't you have tests? Can't you see yourself and say, this is a good paper? Why should a certain journal now decide for you that this is a good paper, this is a bad paper? Can't you have your own mechanism? For example, a University of Dar, can it have people to say that, well, this is a good paper, whether it has been published in a predatory journal or in a good journal? Is it about the journal or it is about the paper? Do you want a good idea of the person or do you want where he lives?
So we need to think about those type of standards. Otherwise, we are simply going around with what they said for us. And this is what the other scholars are saying. This is zombification. Then what is the role of indigenous knowledge, as all theories are Eurocentric? Well, once you say that all theories are Eurocentric, then you know that you don't have a role of the indigenous knowledge, because the indigenous knowledge then will be considered as inferior. So we need, first of all, to understand that in order for us to bring the role of indigenous knowledge, is for us to say that indigenous knowledge also has a role, of which is not there now, because it is considered as superior. It is local. It is not modernized. And then all of a sudden, we are now actually going back and saying, you know, these modern things are bringing a lot of problems, and therefore we need the indigenous, for example, medicine, traditional medicines. They are good because they don't have chemicals and so on. But at the same time, we say these are not good. We need to think about those. What should take to inform the multilateral organizations? And what is our role as academicians? Well, our role is to research and publish. Research on the indigenous knowledge, publish on the indigenous knowledge. Read what the World Bank and the IMF say, and publish to answer them. Rugumamu yesterday talked about what the World Bank said about Africa, that Africa should not have universities. It should only have technical colleges. 1986, that was written. How many papers were published from the Global South? To reply to that, I don't read any. So what is our role as academicians? Our role is not to go into the political arena and speak about this. Our role is to use our research and publish our voices. That is what we are as academicians. And this is what we should be doing. Then the biggest enemy is our mind. And he says a number of Africans would want to go and study in the North. Yes, and why not? Why not? If we don't have anything which is our own, we are simply imitating what the North is doing. It is like having the original and the photocopy. So ours is a photocopy of the North. So why should somebody go for the photocopy and not the original? Why do you blame them for wanting to go into the North where you have the original? Why should anybody want a photocopy of a book instead of the original book? If we want them to study in the South, then we need to create what is our own. And therefore it should be different. So that they can see that this one brings about new change, different from what is already there. If they are seeing that what is here is actually simply a mirror image of what exists in the North, of course, nobody wants a mirror image. So we need to change ourselves. And the last one was about the internal structure of capitalism, of which I have already answered. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We had only 3 questions from people in the room. We start with Dr. Makundi, and then we take 2, 3 4, 5, and then we'll go back for 9, so we can have some closing remarks.
Thank you.
And also myself. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair will also remind you that because it's the last day of the public, I think there will be more of a team kind of discussion. So maybe we could have some words from some PIs from other countries for the, before we close. So mine is on the issue of definitions and indicators, which was very well covered by Dr. Mbirigenda. There was one time I was involved in the development of the African Innovation Outlook, and we had problems with what was brought in by UNESCO and the other international organizations in terms of how we define innovation, for example, in the context of Africa. And we said a lot of innovative or innovation-related activities happens in the informal sector, which is also dominant in the context of Africa. So if we start looking at innovation from the labs, or we look at issues like patents, in order to say whether or not Africa is innovative, then maybe we are wrong. And we had a lot of debates with these colleagues from the West to say we need to have our own indicators of looking at innovation, because otherwise it will be always that Africa is tailing and looked at as if it is not innovative, but we actually are, because we have informal sector and these people are really innovative. Farmers are highly innovative. They are not labs, and there's no way you can fetch what you look at as you are going into the labs in the West. And this is one area we tried, but then they said, we need to have some benchmarks. We need to have a way of comparing. And of course, those benchmarks called Global Innovation Index, etc., are the ones which says we are behind, we are not doing well, and then we become subordinates, we become inferior, and that perpetuates the problem of post-colonialism and colonialism. But then China has a lot of debates with the West in terms of the definition of human rights. I think this is inconclusive. For China, if they give their people basic entitlements of social, medical, healthcare, education, and everything, that's fine. But then the West tells China, if your people are criticizing the government and they are taken to jail, then that is against human rights. And then China says that's how you define human rights, not our definition of human rights. And they are still debating until today. But of course, China is a powerful state, and I think they have their own ways of standing in their own position of the way they define human rights. We go to the definition of poverty, which is what we talk about as development scholars. And there's a lot here. Dr. Mbirigenda talks about $1 a day. That is just one indicator, income. So there is expenditure, but the garden and pick some chicha, the green vegetable, income and expenditure and well-being, and you say they are poor, but they are not really poor. If you go to the supermarket in the West and buy the same kind of vegetables they call spinach or spinach, whatever, it's really expensive, and that can uplift the level of well-being of that person if it was captured, but it's not captured in Africa. So to me, I qualify and join hands with Dr. Mbirigenda saying how we work around these definitions, benchmarks, and indicators. It can transform a lot in terms of how we are looked at, we are the South, and maybe change the narrative and the debate, and maybe decolonize what is existing in terms of how we are looked at from the external world and particularly from the West. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a hand over there.
Thank you, Dr. Mbirigenda, for providing this note. I'm Emmanuel Ayubu, first year of development study at this university. I want to ask some question for this. As you said, as you know, development is for the people, and so many people in the South, they have so many problems, and one of the problems is poverty. So as you said, when we define development. You can't redefine development without talking about World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and the United Nations as the strong institution. So we see, I quote from things that you said, that IMF providing money, not providing money for solving the issue of poverty, but providing money, and when we live with just responding what they're talking about, not to solve this issue of poverty. So my doctor tell me, how can we avoid this issue of depending on them, to avoid hearing from them when you live by depending on them? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mbirigenda, for your wonderful presentation. My name is Halidi Mfumbili. I am a third-year student from the Institute of Development Studies, pursuing Bachelor of Arts in Development Studies. I have one question. My question is that how can we decolonize development studies while all our economic and political system is governed by new colonial model? And also I want to know, Dr. Mbirigenda, are you suggesting African country or Tanzania still practicing the Ujamaa model? And what should be done to decolonize the economic system or political system and following the decolonization of development studies? Or we should start with decolonization of development studies, then we'll follow with the economic and political system? Thank you.
Dr. Mbirigenda, I've never seen you so argumentative. It was really a thoughtful presentation. Generally, I can say your presentation has an implication generally for practices. Most of the solutions really, particularly the 2 points you've raised, are within ourselves. The issue of mindsets, it was already a number of times here. Today and even yesterday, I think there was a passage from Professor Rugumamu presentation. I'll give you one example on the second point of development paradigms. Here, for instance, the University of Dar Salaam, where research guide, academic research guide format, which actually limit the academic research we are conducting here to definition of terms, which it means then to limit the student from a professionalization of the concepts. So if you have such a framework, how can you go to depart from the Western origin of development paradigms? Particularly, even the colonial theory itself is a Western origin. How can you depart from that if we are not encouraging relating those concepts on our realities and context? Again, when you go to theoretical framework, students need to be encouraged to interrogate those theories and as well to come up with hybrid models when they find the theories are inadequate to the issue understood, but as well to extend them or come up with a variety of those theories and the models to guide their studies. So in a way, if you come up with a framework to guide such practices, then you can begin to depart from such paradigms. Thank you so much.
Okay, we are constrained with time, especially those who are online, because this session is supposed to be closed. Actually, we are So I wanted first to invite people online, especially those who are, in the core team from Zambia, Helsinki, and Jyväskylä. We need to hear from you so that we can come to an end, and of course in this room we can continue with our discussion. So who is ready? Monga or Tina? Oh, yes.
Okay.
Tina, please.
Okay, without further ado, I would really like to thank you for this. Today's presentation was very powerful because lately we have been participating in so many discussions about decolonizing of development and decolonizing aid, but they are often, these discussions take place in the northern academic spaces. So that was very powerful, very important initiatives comes from Tanzania and IDS. Tanzania, really looking forward how those ideas and the critiques we discussed today will show in our future collaborations, and also in the discussions that we will have about the curriculum this week. So thank you so much. I'm really following up what is emerging from your effort in IDS. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Tina. Munga, can you hear from you?
Yeah, I think also from my end, it's just about to thank the organizing team from the University of Dar es Salaam, and also the audience for this thought-provoking, discussions. I think the two keynote presentations that we've had both today and also yesterday by Professor Rugumamu, I think these are some of the discussions and really engagements that we need to promote as the academia. And I'm just looking forward to seeing to it that a lot of the discussions that have ensued would really be seen in the new curriculum that we are talking about developing. I think we are in the right direction, and looking forward to further engagement beyond what has just transpired. Thank you once more, and congratulations to the two presenters. I think you've really done sufficient justice to the topic on the table. I thank you.
Thank you, Munga, from University of Zambia. Okay, Barry from Helsinki.
All right. I posted in the chat there a comment I'd like to make about this. Professor Mbirigenda, this was a really powerful talk, as people have said. And said myself, when I first came to my position in the University of Helsinki, that was the philosophy department had organized a big forum where I had to answer the question, what is development studies? And I said, well, in my view, development studies is all about overcoming the legacies of colonialism in a comprehensive way. That is what development studies is. That's why it exists. That is what its purpose is. So we've been discussing today, the ongoing global discussion about decolonization and decoloniality, following Quijano, Mignolo, and others that were cited today, and rightly so. But the reason that we need to decolonize development studies is so that development studies can work to reconfigure development. For all those inequalities and injustices, inherited violence and racism and destruction that are entailed in global capitalism and in its neoliberal globalization form today, all the things that were said today, I agree broadly with all those. And I'm hoping that then when we go on later this week, we will be able to start to organize ourselves in this concrete way to embed those in our redesign of the curriculum, which is a product of our co-construction of knowledge. So I want to thank everybody, as has already been said, all the speakers, all the organizers, all the discussants. I think we've had a very rich opening these 2 days, and I look forward to the way we're going to continue this later in the week.
Thank you, Barry. Beta, are you online from University of Dodoma? Okay.
Benta, she said area she is not feeling okay, so I think maybe we can read some few of the comments online.
Let's hear first from Ilmari.
Yeah, the coordinator.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Mbirigenda. It was very interesting to hear about this, and also regarding this project, it is very interesting to hear your thoughts on the academic collaboration between North and South and how we can further develop our cooperation between our universities. And I'm sure we will come up with good ways to do that to finish the project within the year to come. But very thought-provoking presentation, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Is Christopher? Christopher? Not online. So thank you very much. So we let's hear also from Dr. Soka speak on behalf of the co-chairing so that I don't speak anything.
Oh, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank everybody, those who are online and those who are physically here in person. Today we had 43 people online, and together we make 90 participants together. So it's a big number, and I wanted to thank everyone for participating. I saw Wivina from Germany and the people from Zambia, people from Zambia, Jyväskylä, Dodoma, Helsinki, and Salaam, and people in Tanzania and elsewhere. I saw Dr. Leonia was online. One from Norway. So it's really a global participation. Everybody is engaged. Thank you all for coming, for attending, whether online or in person. But also we have a coordinator. The first coordinator was Professor Shak. He was online, but I don't hear him now. We've been Mari, Professor Mari has always been there. Thank you for your support and directions in every time we have an issue. The team in Salaam has worked so hard to prepare this. The support we got from the core team, Zambia, Dodoma, Jyväskylä, and Helsinki. It's very important for us to make this come to this situation. Our two speakers, Professor Rugumamu and Dr. Mbirigenda, thank you for your presentation and thought-provoking. We have many ideas that we can contribute, and people will continue for the rest of the week to ponder some of these issues as they come. Questions that were asked here, I was taking my notes, and I will put time to ask some of those good questions that we might engage and talk about more and more. The same applies to Dr. Manara's question. We can engage more and more on some of these issues. Dr. Jali, my co-chair, has been also leading us today. Dr. Jali is currently the director of IDS-UDSM. We also saw Dr. Lulu from Zumbe, and she did say the power issues, divide issues that they are affected in Zumbe. So the participation is very limited. But I had an engagement with her the other day, and you remember the last IDS conference, the Joint Studies Conference was held in Dar es Salaam. And the next conference is this year, and it will be held in Morogoro, Zumbe. And we are looking for November, when the students resume after the long holidays. So that students can also participate and instructors as well. So we look forward for another, some of these forums. We will be sitting together. I hope our colleagues from all over the world can also attend. if we are able to put the online facility like this, so that they can also engage and contribute to some of these discussions that we've started here. With that, let me bring this to you, bring the session to a close, and if there are other issues that we can discuss and respond to some of the questions, because I know the online time is limited. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Msoka has covered, I am covered with what Dr. Msoka has said. We are very thankful for everyone who participated, whether in person or online. And we look forward to having you again when we will be having another session of this nature, and I think that will be in Zambia. Yeah, so having said this,
Hamza, anything critical to read from online things? Or with that?
There are just general comments and questions of which we have taken them about, and then we'll compile in the final report because of the interest of time.
Okay, and lastly, we don't want to leave all issues that were raised unattended. Dr. Mbirigenda, if we can use a few minutes to sum up. We are sorry we will not be able to engage. While we are online, if we can decide to continue after this, but I think for the purposes of formal session, let's Dr. Mbirigenda sum up the few comments that were provided before we can close the session.
Thank you. There were 3 issues that were raised about how do we stand against the UN, WTO, IMF, and the World Bank. Well, the only way we can stand up is together we stand and alone we fall. So as countries individually, there is nothing that we can do. But if we come together, then our voice can be heard. If Africa, for example, come together, if all these oppressed countries around the globe come together, southern countries, when we talk about southern countries, we mean all the developing countries around the world. So if these come together, then they can make their voices heard. Otherwise, it's not possible. How do we decolonize? Should we go for Jama? Should we start with this, or should we start with the economy? I don't have an answer. As I said before, this is a discussion, so we should all be involved how we should decolonize. Ujamaa is one solution, but then it cannot be the Ujamaa of Nyerere. Time has passed. So the question is, how do we modify that Ujamaa fit our own situation now, our own environment, our own global development that have evolved. Should we start with the DS or the economy? The question is, when we talk about should you start defining development and then develop, or should you develop and then define? The question is, if you start with development, then you wouldn't even know if you are developing if you don't define it first. So you should know what development is, and then you can go for it. So the question is, what is our development, for example, as Tanzanians? What is it that we want? During the time of Nyerere, we had that definition, that our development for us is a good life of the people. So this is the reason why we never went, for example, to build nice hospitals and so on, but we went to prevent diseases. If you go for the definition of the World Bank and the IMF, whereby definition of health is about the number of doctors in comparison with the population, then you are about treating the people after they get disease. But Nyerere is saying this is risky. So our development is about the people. How do we make a person have a better life? How do we make a person not suffer from sickness, from poverty, and so on. So we had a definition of development by then. But the question is right now, what is development for Tanzania? That is not there. So the reason why I say we need to agree first on this concept before even we start operationalizing it. You can't operationalize something which you don't know. The last one, actually, it was from Dr. Manara, and it was not a question. So I thank Dr. Manara for the contribution. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mahundi. Do you have anything to say, our Master of Ceremony? Okay, so once again, thank you very much for coming. We have utilized time beyond what we planned. So with this remark, I want to mention that the session is closed. Thank you.
Hmm?